The atomic age began with a promise of abundant nuclear power for generations to come. But for decades, anti-nuclear activists have argued that nuclear energy was too dangerous.
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have admitted that it happened. The Soviet version is this. One of the atomic reactors at the Chernobyl atomic power plant near the city of Kiev was damaged, and there is speculation in Moscow that people were injured and may have died.
It happened in Chernobyl. It happened in Fukushima. What if it happens again?
Disaster at Chernobyl did not confine itself to the plant. It extended to a wide area that concentrated in Ukraine and Belarus and Western Europe, Eastern Europe.
Nuclear power isn't safe. You know, I spent a month in Fukushima just about a year ago, and oh my God, to look at the contamination everywhere. And they'll never clean it up, and there'll be cancers for hundreds of years. So it's not safe.
On the other side of the argument are those who say that nuclear energy is clean and the best way to combat climate change.
Burning coal is dangerous. They estimate that thousands of people die every year in this country from respiratory illnesses brought on by fumes from coal plants. And our reactors aren't designed to be ticking bombs. They're designed to shut down if something goes wrong. So look at the record. We've had 100 reactors running for practically 40 years now, and have had no accidents of any consequence.
Indian Point is a power plant situated in the small and quiet city of Buchanan. It has been at the center of the nuclear power controversy for decades. 9/11 introduced a new concern. What if terrorists targeted our nuclear power plants?
The first thing I knew about was right after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. It was discovered that a lot of the pilots that were training for those terror attacks were going down the river here. It's called the Hudson River Corridor, a low-altitude air corridor, and they passed by Indian Point several times. It's been surmised in the 9/11 Commission report that Indian Point was an alternative target. Had there been fog and they couldn't see the World Trade Center, they would have struck Indian Point. Had they breached one of the industrial buildings that hold the spent fuel, it could have poured out millions of curies of nuclear waste and devastated the entire area.
300,000 people live in the 10-mile radiological emergency evacuation zone. 17.5 miles marks the peak fatality zone. 20 million residents live in a 50-mile radius, which is called the peak injury zone.
So there's always been a concern voiced. I guess the loudest critic has been Governor Cuomo, who said that, you know, its proximity to large, densely populated areas would create a problem if there had to be an evacuation. There's just so many people in the surrounding area. So folks had been, at least certain lawmakers had been concerned that if anything were to go wrong there, would people be able to get out of the way of a nuclear explosion?
Beyond concerns about terrorism, there are other concerns about plant safety.
You got to remember, it's now, I want to say 45 years old, and when they built it, there weren't transistors and integrated circuits and computers and stuff like that. I mean, this thing was designed back when TVs that were black and white and had rabbit ears. So that's what the technology that it was built to. After they built it, they found a fault, a seismic fault about a mile to the north.
Indian Point is built on two fault lines. There's one, the Ramapo fault line, and another newly discovered one that runs to Connecticut. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has even stated that every year there's a 1 in 10,000 chance of Indian Point suffering a catastrophic failure as a result of an earthquake. That, to me, is not very good odds, as high as they may seem.
Activists are also concerned about the effects of the plant on the environment. For the past decades, a local organization known as Riverkeeper has been arguing for the closing of Indian Point.
The once-through cooling system that they use to cool the plant in its operations takes in 1.5 billion gallons of river water. That's twice as much water as used by the city of New York in a single day. That water that they take in pulls in small fish, larvae, and eggs, and sometimes these fish get impinged or caught on the screens on the intake, and the water that comes out is like 110 degrees. Now that hot water that comes out, it kills the fish because it's 20, 30, 40 degrees warmer than the water that they're in. So especially the young and mortal fish, it kills them. We call Indian Point on the river the mother of all killers.
In January of 2017, an announcement came that changed everything.
This is Weekend Edition here on WNYC. Good morning, I'm Sean Carlson. The Indian Point nuclear power plant will close within the next 4 years under a reported deal between the governor's office and the plant's owner, Entergy.
The announcement that Indian Point would close led to new controversies and concerns.
Are we about to become Detroit? That's the real question.
This could be economically catastrophic.
Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino, who ran against Cuomo in 2015, says losing the more than $5 million in taxes and the plant's jobs would definitely hurt.
Indian Point was a very big supporter of the tax base in those communities, like I mentioned. How is that money going to be made up? Westchester County itself receives about $5 million in tax revenue. How is that money going to be made up?
Folks were sort of caught off guard, and a lot of folks there are now becoming very outspoken about losing they want to prevent this plant from closing. Talking about property revenues and how it'll cut money out of that school budget.
Well, it hasn't affected me yet, but I feel it will affect me by taxes and a lot of people in this town that may lose their job.
It's going to affect everybody around here. I mean, it's really going to decimate this whole place. Well, I live in this community. I mean, my taxes are going to go up a little bit higher. I don't know if I can afford to live here anymore. So I don't know. I'm concerned. Definitely concerned.
Entergy closing Indian Point is going to have a lot of effect on the town and the area. The biggest is going to be on the schools, because the schools have a $60 million budget, and about $20 million of that comes from Entergy. They've been a good citizen in the past. They've contributed a lot of money to the schools, and how they make that up is going to be, how the schools make up the money is going to be very interesting.
Well, as I mentioned, this was a surprise to all of us in government. It came to us on a Friday afternoon at about 2:30. All of us have come together under the leadership of our county executive, Rob Astorino, to ask the questions that need to be asked to make sure that our communities are protected because of this closing, which we had no input into when the agreement was being negotiated.
Over the last few years, natural gas prices have come down, and the price of nuclear energy is sort of directly tied to gas prices because they're both competing to provide energy, power to consumers. So as the price of natural gas comes down, nuclear power has to bring its prices down as well.
It is true that Entergy wanted to close Indian Point. They had been looking for a seller for several months, and they had said so in the press. They had been looking to get out of what is called the merchant nuclear industry. The closing of this plant gives them what they wanted.
Environmentalists for years have wanted to get rid of that plant, and they've called for its shutdown over and over. And there have been protests. We've covered protests for decades about Indian Point. So the marketplace sort of did what the protesters couldn't, which is to force them to sort of shut that place down.
Despite its promise, nuclear power may create far too many safety and economic concerns for the public. Whether it's a truly zero-carbon alternative or an environmental hazard, The drop in energy costs due to fracking may have taken nuclear off the table.